And welcome back to another episode of Too Much Pod Tar. As today is April 3rd, and I'm going to be continuing our This Day in Baseball History series. And today I'm doing it solo, so just going to be a shorter episode probably as I just run through these things that happened on this day.
That's gone. George Brett has just homered, and Billy Martin and the Yankees want the bat. Look at Martin.
Well, what you're talking about, Frank, is that he's got too much
Pod Tar.
way too much pod tar.
And the first really notable thing that happened was back in 2011. Ian Kinsler and Nelson Cruz, both members of the Rangers, they became the first pair of players to homer in each of their first three games in a season. The first pair of teammates to do that. And they ended up sweeping the Red Sox in their opening series in that. But yeah, the first pair of teammates to hit a homer each of their first three games. So that's pretty impressive to do that. And then the Rangers that year obviously ended up going, as we had that live stream actually of the Rangers and Cardinals in the World Series. They ended up going to the World Series, but eventually ended up losing in Game 7 as we streamed the Game 6 game on Twitter about, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, something. So, yeah, they ended up losing that game. The next night, Game 7, the Cardinals won. But, yeah, they ended up having a really good season, even though they lost in the World Series. But, yeah, now the Rangers are hoping to get back to go on another playoff run soon. I mean, obviously they're in a tough division. They got the Astros in there. They got the A's in there. Who are going to be tough. Angels got better, so it's going to be tough. But they can definitely. I think they're going to be like they're not going to be anything. If we do have a season this year, I don't think they're going to go on much of a run. But I think they could be good in a few years. I think they can do something. They have some young guys there that end up coming up and doing some things, so they're not bad. I think they're going to be good in a few years. And then we go back to 2010. The Blue Jays agreed to a 4-year contract with Adam Lind, $18 million. And he had hit 305 with 35 bombs and 114 RBIs the previous season. And then over the 4-year contract, he ended up doing. He didn't do terrible. He played in 150 games the first year of the contract, which was the most he played over the contract. And that year he did hit 237, but every other year he hit at least 251. He hit 26 bombs in 2011, which is his most over the 4 years, and drove in 87 runs also that year, which is the most over the contract. And then 2012, 2014. 2014 was the last year of his contract, but he only played 96 games. 2012 he played 93. So, he kind of missed some games there. He didn't play as much, but the other years he played at least 125 games, so he was pretty durable. But then after the contract, he ended up going over to the Brewers, and then Seattle for 1 year, and then the Nationals for 1 year in 2017, which was the last year he did end up playing in the majors. Because actually, he was with he did end up splitting time. He signed with in 2018. He was with the Red Sox and Yankees in their minor league systems, but wasn't even in the majors at all last year. I think he retired last year, so he's not around anymore. But yeah, he wasn't too bad. He wasn't terrible with the Blue Jays. He gave him solid durability for a few of those years, and he put up decent production, so he wasn't terrible. And then the year before, 2009, both the Yankees and Mets opened their new stadiums. The Mets obviously with Citi Field, Yankees with the new Yankee Stadium, and they both ended up winning in their their new stadium inauguration. So pretty good opening for both of them. And then obviously that was the year that the Yankees won their 27th World Series championship. So it's definitely a good opening year for them. And the Mets haven't been able to win a World Series, but they did make it to the World Series in 2015, losing to the Royals. But yeah, that was the only time they've been to the World Series since the new stadium opened. And they've always had this the same kind of curse, if you want to call it. They've been kind of cursed with a bunch of injuries over the last few years. They've seemed like they're good on paper. They have they have a solid pitching staff, but then they always seem like they have at least a couple injuries to that pitching staff. So it's tough for them. Even as a Yankees fan, I root for them to do good. I don't want them to lose, do bad. I want to see them do good. They're not really a rival. As much as Mets fans say that the Yankees Mets is a rivalry, it's not. It's really not. They just they just hate to love us for some reason. Just because the Yankees have had success and the Mets haven't had as much success. Obviously, they just kind of hate on it. They hate us because they ain't us. I guess that's all it is. Yep, they hate us because they ain't us. Also, that was the same year that the Mets signed Gary Sheffield. The same day on this day, they signed Gary Sheffield, who was released by the Tigers unexpectedly. He still had $14 million left on his contract when they released him, so it's kind of surprising to see something like that happen. But then the Mets ended up signing him, and that's where he finished his career. And he had, he played 100 games that year. He put up 10 more home runs to cross the 500 career home run mark. So he ended up finishing up for the 509. Hit 276 that year, so it wasn't terrible. He had he's had a solid year there. Finished it off, and he finished with 1,676 career RBIs as well. 292 career batting average, so it's pretty solid 22-year career. After he played with the Brewers, started with the Brewers, and then went over to the Padres for 2 seasons, or a season and a half. Then went to the Marlins, then the Dodgers for 3.5 seasons. Then and it was with the Marlins for 5 seasons, or 5.5. I mean, and then he went after the Dodgers. He went to the Braves for 2 years, or basically a year and a half, and then went to the Yankees for 3. Well, his last year with them, he only played 25 games, so it was a shorter. Or no, not 25. Yeah, Braves. He was there for 2 years, and then the Yankees. He was there for pretty much 3 years. Well, 39 games only played in actually the 2006, and then he went to the Tigers for those 2 years before he got released by them, and then to the Mets. And pretty solid year. Pretty solid career. It wasn't too. It was pretty solid. Obviously, with 500 home runs for his career, and he made 8 All-Star games, and he won. He won the World Series with the Marlins in 1997, so he was able to accomplish that, get a ring. That was only one, but that's all that matters. At least getting one in your career that's the goal, is at least getting one. If you get one, that's still solid. You get a ring. That's what it all comes down to. That's all everybody's goal is, to get a World Series ring. But then the year before, also just to add that he was signed to just the major league minimum by the Mets. So yeah, and then 2008, the year before that, was when the Reds had the debut of Johnny Cueto. He made his debut and had a great performance, striking out 10 batters in 7 innings. So the Reds ended up beating the Diamondbacks 3-2. And he struck out 8 of the first 13 batters he faced, so that was impressive. And Cueto's he's had a pretty solid career, and now he's with the Giants still. I believe he's still with the Giants. Yeah, he's still with the Giants now. And I would kind of expect him probably to be traded if there is a trade deadline, if there is a season at all, I think there would be somebody that the Giants would want to trade at the deadline because obviously he's a little bit older. He's 34. Giants are going to be rebuilding, so they're probably going to end up wanting to move from his contract. So I think that'll be somebody they look to move at the trade deadline this year. If there is one, if there is a year, if there is anything, but we don't know anything at all, so it's going to be tough. I hope we get a season, hopefully. And even if there is a season, I don't know when the trade deadline is going to be. If it'll be like in August this year or whatever, I don't know. I'll just have to see, wait. But yeah, that's tough. But let's go a couple years before that. As we go to 2006, that was when the Mets network SNY debuted in the regular season, had its first broadcast in the regular season. And they actually ended up experiencing technical difficulties in the third inning of that game, which the Mets ended up winning 3-2. But they experienced technical difficulties, but I mean now it's still around. I mean they're doing good now. That network, both that network and the Yes Network for the Yankees they're both definitely really solid networks for both teams. Also that same year was first Japanese-born catcher to start a major league game as Kenji Johima. Hopefully I didn't butcher his name, but he started with the Mariners at 30 years old, and he actually homered in his debut against the Angels. So solid debut for him, and it's awesome for obviously for Japan, and so it's definitely cool to see for other countries' players to be playing in this great sport of baseball. And at 2005, we had the first major leaguer to be publicly identified under baseball's new steroid policy, as the Rays outfielder ended up receiving a 10-day suspension for testing positive for steroids, which nowadays 10 days is not. That's really short. Like only 10 days now. If you test positive, you get at least 80 games. So definitely a change there now. It's been a lot more strict. And then we go to 2002. Barry Bonds, speaking of steroids, obviously he's obviously involved with steroids and all that stuff, but 2002 he became the second player in history to begin a season with consecutive 2 home run games, as he joined Eddie Matthews, who did it in 1958. So definitely good company there for Bonds, and Bonds does belong in the Hall of Fame. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. Hopefully he gets voted in this year, and we'll have to see, but hopefully he does. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer even without steroids. I mean, yeah, even without steroids, he was a really solid player, so it didn't have an impact on his numbers. I mean, it did a little bit, but he still, before the steroids, he was a solid player. He was probably the best player of all time, so he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame along with Roger Clemens. So that's a story. That's an argument for another day, but and then we go to 1990. It's actually kind of a funny one. Billy Hatcher of the Pirates, he was actually in the delivery room waiting for his pregnant wife to give birth, and he got a call on his phone, and he picks up the phone, and it's Pirates manager Jim Leland, and Leland tells him that he's been traded, and he doesn't ask what team. He doesn't even know what team it is. And then his daughter's born, and when he's at home, he gets a call from the general manager of the Reds, Bob Quinn, and welcoming to the Reds. So he's kind of kind of a weird situation there. He gets a call from Jim Leland telling him he's been traded, but he doesn't even know what team. Doesn't tell him what team he's been traded to. Didn't even ask. But then later he gets home after his wife gives birth, and then he gets a call from his new GM, which it's a little bit of a crazy situation there. As the middle of watching your baby being born and you end up getting traded. So definitely crazy. And 1989, we got a special debut as Ken Griffey Jr. He made his debut at 19 years old. And obviously he was the son of Ken Griffey, who played with the Reds and was still active on the Reds. And obviously Griffey Jr., as everybody calls him, he wound up having an amazing career, and that started off his debut. And he, in his first at bat, he actually had a double off Dave Stewart, and that was a great start to his career to get off to such a hot start, getting a hit in his first at bat. So definitely a sign of things to come. And now he's in the Hall of Fame. So this is a special day as we look back on Ken Griffey Jr. making his debut. It's always fun with these episodes to look back on. It's the plus side of not having any new baseball at the time. It's looking back at history. I love baseball history. Baseball history is it's like the sport that has the most history. The most crazy things has been some crazy things we've seen as we've done these episodes, looking back and finding these different things that are happening, like players being traded for stadiums and stuff like that. But and it's also awesome to see somebody looking back on these debuts of some of the all-time great players. And then we go to 1987. The Cubs traded Dennis Eckersley, who was a starter at the time, and minor leaguer Dan Rowan to the A's for 3 minor leaguers. And then Eckersley, he ended up turning into one of the best relievers in the game. He saved 320 games during his 9 years with the A's. So it was kind of a fail. He's another one of those guys, failed starter. He tried him as a starter, and the Cubs they wanted to move on from him. He wasn't doing good as a starter, and they moved on from him. And then he turns into a reliever, and obviously one of the most dominant ones. So it's crazy. A lot of these pitchers still get them nowadays too. That they start out as a starter and then they just fail as that. So we've seen a lot of them over the years. Dylan Betances was one with the Yankees. He was a starter at first, and then he ended up being a dominant reliever. And he was one of their most reliable during his tenure with them. Now he's with the Mets, signed with them over the offseason. But he was definitely a really solid reliever. He's been a solid reliever. I guess just a lot of pitchers are just more. They're just better as relievers. I just something about it. I don't know. I guess they just can't last that many innings. I think another one with the talk about my team, the Yankees. Obviously, I could talk about the Yankees. Like Johnny's always mentioned the Twins, so I'm allowed to talk about the Yankees. But anyway, with the Yankees too. Another one I can give an example for is Jonathan Loaizaga, right, as the current team. The Yankees have tried him as a starter before. I think he's better. His stuff fits better in the bullpen, or even as an opener, just pitching a couple innings to start off the game. I think he's better suited for that for sure. So I think that's another example. But been going back to this day, we go back 1985. The owner's proposal of expanding the league championship series to a best of seven, best of seven, best of seven, best of seven. I was trying to say Marcus Simeon there, but yeah. But the best of 7, they agreed to the Players Association agreed to extending that to a best of 7 instead of just best of 5, which it started out as in 1969 when they divided into divisions. And in 1984, a year before that, Barbaro Garbi became the first Cuban refugee to play in the majors, and he made his debut on opening day. And he was a pinch hitter in the 7th inning of the game, stayed in the game to play first, and Tigers won that game 8-1. And there was a couple of trades. That's not really anything notable, not too notable. But 1974, Indians traded Pedro Guerrero to the Dodgers for pitcher Bruce Ellingson. And Pedro Guerrero was 17 years old at the time. He ended up hitting .309 and was named to the All-Star team 5 times during his 11 seasons with the Dodgers. So definitely a pretty solid career, 11 years with them, but not really too notable of a trade. Wasn't anything crazy. Indian, and then 10 years before that, 1974. Oh, sorry, that was 1974. 5 years before that, 1969, the Phillies traded first baseman Bill White to the Cardinals for infielder Jerry Buchik and Jim Hudo, who was a utility player. White ended up retiring after just 1 year at the Cardinals, and he ended up becoming the president of the National League after being a broadcaster with the Yankees. And then another trade, but the year before that, 1968, the Tigers traded lefty Hank Aguirre to the Dodgers for a player to be named later, who ended up being Fred Mulder. And Aguirre ended up striking out 61%. Actually, his batting career was more notable. Like he was actually being more known than pitching for being the worst hitter in the majors ever. He had a .085 batting average during a 16-year career, and he struck out at a 61% rate of his 388 at bats. Struck out 61% of his 388 at bats. I mean, as a pitcher, it's not really that crazy, but still having sub 100 batting average. But yeah, that's really nothing. There's nothing else really that big for this year. There wasn't really too many things that happened. Not many big things that happened this day in history. But yeah, we looked back on that day, April 3rd. Obviously, the biggest thing was Ken Griffey Jr. making his debut for the Mariners, and we all know how that turned out. That was probably the biggest thing of the day. So yeah, that's April 3rd, and we continue this series every day until hopefully we get baseball back this year. And if not, we'll be continuing these kind of mini episodes, trying to find content. Probably doing these episodes as we fill the content, because there's really nothing else to do except look back on time, look back at history, look back at these cool things as we do this. And we also been doing these what if articles for the Scorecrow, and you can find Johnny's first 2 parts of his what if the 1994 season didn't end with that strike. It wasn't cut short. And he has the first 2. He has the AL side and the NL side, and then he's going to be doing his World Series side too. So he'll be finishing that up soon to get that out. And I'll be working on my Babe Ruth one for that. And yeah, we'll probably be doing a bunch of those because we have nothing else really to talk about. There's nothing else really going on except looking back in time, looking back in history, like I said. But yeah, follow us on the Scorecrow on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. follow myself at Alex Keeler on Twitter, as I've been doing actually a bracket, a tournament for the best MLB player of all time. I'm down to the Sweet 16 now, which is finishing up today. So if you want to go on my Twitter, find that, and you'll see it's the first few things on my page that I retweeted today. So you can go and vote on that, and yeah, it'll be down to the Elite Eight today after the Sweet 16 the voting is done for that. I have been doing it for 24 hours each round, so yeah, that'll be still going on, and you can vote on that. And yeah, that's it for this episode. Please make sure you check out every other episode we've done. After you have this downtime, you can go back and listen to the other ones that we've done. And appreciate you giving us reviews. Every review helps. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. And yeah, and just a reminder, you can never have too much pod power.